Thank you all for joining us, and I'll kick us off by introducing our panel members. We're then going to have a bit of a discussion around some of the themes raised in the film, and then open it up to questions from the floor. I'll be in charge of keeping everyone moving and keeping the discussion running along. But to kick us off, I'll introduce. You have met Anika Young, but what she didn't tell you is that she's currently the Māori Cultural Advisor and Environmental Science at Cawthron Institute, where she sits in the Māori Business Development team, working alongside a group of Māori scientists. She also owns her own business as an environmental and cultural consultant and works in the resource management space. Next to her is the wonderful Amy Kennedy, who has a lifelong passion for learning and how to be a positive and active, connected part of it, as well as with experience working on the Kids Edible Gardens project and Germinate Collective, and helping to establish Friends of the Mai Tai and the Nelson Seed Library. Currently, she's exploring where social justice and liberation issues connect with addressing the climate emergency that I'm sure we'll get onto in our later discussion. Next, joining us is Mr. Ben Bushell, the General Manager for Community Compost, of which has recently kicked off here in Nelson, or not too recently, which is about small-scale composting, joining part of a much larger global movement. And finally, we have Hannah O'Malley, who's a community pharmacist and founder of the Better Base, a social enterprise that helps people and organisations shift towards healthy, sustainable, plant-based kai. And through that, she's led advocacy for food policy changes, hosted educational events and cooking classes, and online interacted with tens of thousands of people. I know her because she's also advocated to Nelson City Council a fair bit. So, kicking off, one of the things we saw throughout the film was discussion around food and food production and food waste, and there was the great quote in there that that waste is a human construct. Nature doesn't do waste. And so Ben, that focuses quite clearly into the space that you're currently in. Perhaps you could elaborate on the work that you're doing in the community and what role you see yourself playing as part of that action.
Good evening, everyone. Hi. So, Community Compost collects and composts food waste. We started 3 years ago, and we finally started getting some traction this year. We compost about a tonne of food waste that we collect from homes and businesses. Tonne every week.
Could you speak up a little bit?
Sure, is that a bit better like that?
Yeah.
The speaker's just behind our heads, so it seems really loud for us, but as long as you can hear, I'll bear it. So we're composting about a tonne a week, which we collect from homes and businesses. They sign up to our service and we provide the collection and a clean bucket every week. A big part of what we do is kind of research and education. So at all stages, we're just trying to be more efficient and produce a better compost at the end. I think a lot of people in the space are just seeing food waste as a huge issue that needs to be got rid of. I'm pretty confident that no one in our organisation thinks that at all, and it's really a beautiful resource that we should be taking forward and sharing in the community. It might be a bit controversial with other organisations, but I think our vision would be to provide free compost for everyone at some point in the future. I think everyone that wants to grow should be able to have access to amazing compost. There shouldn't be any restrictions there. And I'd follow that with sharing the knowledge as well. Like we make a new heap every week, and we're super happy to a new compost heap every week. We'd like to do manure and people. So if anyone wants to come along on Saturday, we have basically just provide as much information as we have. We were happy to share, so you can take it away. We also want to support people starting their own community composting hubs in the region. So if anyone wants any support doing that, we'd love to start in Motueka, we'd love to start in Benham, we'd love to start in Picton. So if you know people that are keen and have some energy, we'd love to support you. We've come quite a long way and we've got it quite efficient now, so if there's anything we can do to help that, we'd go. And I'm carrying on talking.
It's fascinating. That concept of providing compost for all, one of the things that struck me watching that film is that a lot of it was sort of individuals on a sort of, large, fairly decent plot of land, being able to do their own food production, which is, of course, as a young person, a reality quite far removed, and for many people, that's not sort of the opportunity currently and directly available. So I wonder, opening it up to whoever's most keen to answer, how do we start in making that change at a higher sort of community level? Bringing it up from the individual, as organisations like the Climate Forum have been doing, and getting that community engagement on it. Hannah's looking keen.
I'll take that one. Kia ora koutou, everybody. So I think firstly connecting through groups like the Climate Forum or the Community Compost Group or whatever it is, whatever aspect of your life that you're passionate about that includes sustainability, finding other people in the community that are like-minded, and then figuring out, what pathway or avenue, whether it's council, whether it's the DHB, whether it's a school or your organisation, and coming up with a plan of how you can take something actionable to them. And I think building the relationships as well. If you get a no the first time, then don't let that set you back. I was told to expect no's, so don't be disheartened. But I think the more people that you can get together and sharing that vision, the more likely you probably are to succeed.
I completely agree, and I guess that idea of connection came up quite a bit throughout the film, and that relationship not just between people but also with the land, which is something that, as was noted, is very prevalent here in New Zealand or Aotearoa through Te Ao Māori or the Māori worldview. So, Anika, how do you think that Te Ao Māori can provide a pathway for a sustainable future?
Kia ora koutou. So I guess Te Ao Māori, the Māori worldview, is it's a way of being, and here in New Zealand, the peoples that have created that relationship with the whenua, with the wai, has been through, I guess, subsistence lifestyles historically, and so with that in mind, it did create that respect for the environment, for the tai ao. Now we're seeing a lot of interest in the Māori world, and mainly it's thinking about, well, how can we take the lessons, the values from those ways of being. And so, in Aotearoa we have had some interesting historical accounts, and our whānau, our hapu, our iwi around New Zealand have been disconnected from their whenua and lost their way a little bit. And so, I really think that we have quite strong values around things like kaitiakitanga, but it's how you view the environment, and so viewing those natural features as a brother, as a sister, as that you've derived from that place gives you a whole new sort of perspective around how you treat that particular resource or that area. So there's lots of lessons around the philosophy of the Māori way of thinking, and of course other Indigenous people from around the globe have that similar kind of understanding. So it's learning. It's that the movie actually did sort of remind me of the fact that, I get in my car every day to go to work. But, how can we develop that connection? And so gardening, that's great. And just thinking, well, removing the whole economic system would be, that would be a bonus, wouldn't it? But it's tricky, but, how can we start looking at ourselves and our values and what we're doing? And so I think, a lot of the Māori, the ways of understanding the world can be useful for our communities.
Yeah, and just touching on one of the themes in there, which is, of course, the existing legacy of colonialism and the impact of that. We know that 80% of native forests globally are under sort of the kaitiaki of indigenous peoples. And of course, bringing that out to sort of a higher level of how we can incorporate, in the New Zealand context again, Te Tiriti o Waitangi into our activism. Amy, we had a bit of a discussion about this earlier on, but I wonder whether you could sort of discuss how you view that relationship of bringing that role as a treaty partner into your activism.
Being Pākehā, first generation on my dad's side, fifth generation on my mum's side, I think I have a real personal responsibility to learn my people's history and where our disconnect was from our connection to land, to water, to sky, to elements that keep us thriving and the other living things around us thriving. So there's that aspect, and there's also here in Aotearoa learning the history that has been the story of our land, where we can connect here, learning about the not so good stuff, and working towards redressing that in our activism as well, and working out where it gets hard, where it gets uncomfortable, and really facing that uncomfortableness, but together. And maybe there's work that for Pākehā we have to do, maybe not with our Māori brothers and sisters, that we actually do that work ourselves. We don't rely on them to do it for us. This is our job. And and I think seeing some of the shift that's happening, with the conversations around Black Lives Matter and discussions of racism, and how that fits into the ecological destruction in the planet as well, and how we can, when we redress those injustices and begin the healing process for all of our peoples that we get to do, get to move ecologically as well.
Yeah, and I think you said something very sort of astute there, which is that it is hard, and that activism, especially when it does feel very much on that individual level, is challenging. And so, we're here tonight under the great organisational skills of the Resiliency subcommittee of the Climate Forum. What sustains you? What place do you sort of go to? You again, Amy.
Okay.
Sort of go to continue on when things get tough.
I think it's the connections with other people, with my loved ones in my life, with my chicken in the backyard, I loved in the movie, I can't remember who it was, but that deep love that you get for a living being or an entity, that you actually, you get to have that. So I'm blessed to be able and privileged to have that opportunity in my life, to have people around me, have plants and animals around me. So that, and also re-evaluation co-counselling, is another thing that I do, and connecting with people through XR and the Climate Forum, and where people are really focusing on taking action. And the other groups that I'm organised and involved in, it's the gathering and sharing your fears and your passions and your frustrations, but also learning how it all works, and then taking the action that the group sees is necessary. Yeah.
I think that's what's such a gem of having, you know, a room full of people all connected in that way, and so make the most of it. Talk to, you know, make a new connection, because we do need that, as you said, to build that strength. We need those connections, and Hannah touched on it earlier in terms of making community change. It is all about those connections. Pivoting slightly, so I had the privilege of emceeing a talk from Hannah earlier in the week, and one of the things that jumped out to me in the movie was that discussion of less meat versus no meat, and I'd be really interested to hear your take on it.
How long have I got? So I think the key message Mike Joy summed up really well at the end is that, you know, reducing meat is a very important thing, and if that's all people can do, then that's a really amazing thing. There's a couple of factors that come into play when we say, is it best to do less meat or no meat? One of them is around, obviously, comparing it to what else is possible. So if we're reducing or eliminating meat, what else are we having instead, and how is that grown? If we're replacing it with things like legumes and whole grains, more fruit and veggies and nuts and seeds, try to make sure that those are grown in environmentally sustainable ways as well, because as we saw, monocultures of, you know, plant crops still have a lot of issues with them. In saying that, generally plant crops have a far lower carbon footprint and also far lower impact on fresh water and the oceans than animal-derived foods. So generally, the further we can shift towards a fully plant-based diet, the lower the ecological impact. And if we think about our choices, those of us who are privileged enough to have choices and be in a very wealthy country, looking at around the world, we've got finite resources, finite space to grow food, and if we as a global community need to be drastically reducing the amount of animals that we've got on the planet, which are mostly all for human consumption, then those of us in privileged countries need to be doing more and as much as we can, because there are a lot of people in overseas countries who don't have a choice of what they're eating. So yeah, those are the comments I'd say.
Thanks. And I guess the other thing that raised for me was looking sort of through the process. Ben, what does that mean for you, the degree to which sort of people consume more, you know, when you're dealing with food waste? What impact does sort of the makeup of that waste have on your job? Is there challenges to sort of composting higher meat loads as opposed to those with higher plant?
Technical question. Primarily the first challenge that meat and dairy in the compost we meet is when we open the bucket and we're hit with meat and dairy waste as opposed to vegetable waste. I don't need to describe it. In the compost itself, it takes a whole different plethora of biology. The microorganisms are completely different. So yes, composting meat and dairy is fine, but we do have to essentially breed and take care of the habitat for meat and dairy decomposers as well. The product at the end is still amazing when we make it, so don't worry about that. But at home, you're going to struggle with potential pathogens and lots of pests. So if you are going to compost meat and dairy at home, I really recommend giving us a call, and we can talk to you about it.
Great. Now I've got a couple of sort of related questions where I'd like to sort of get a sense from the whole panel, maybe starting with Anika. sorry to throw you on the deep end here. One of the key messages in the film was those personal changes. What are you personally doing, in this role, in this sort of awareness? What steps do you think you sort of personally take to reduce your impact on the whenua?
It's quite a personal question, Rohan.
It is.
I think there's the obvious things, like, I've got a really cool, groovy little coffee reusable cup, which I actually really like. Because I like it so much, I use it all the time. But in the past, I've had really terrible ones and not that great. So, over lockdown, I actually made a whole new garden as well, which was cool. I have a really busy lifestyle, and I'm all over the show, lots of travel, and so lockdown was a really awesome opportunity just to stop and rethink, what am I doing here? Where can I make those changes? And so, I've got some really lush green spinach in the garden and some garlic, and moving to another location now where I'm closer to work. I've got a bigger garden as well, so I think, and coming away from this film, it's I think that's where I'm going to be, in the dirt. But there are other things that I'm doing which are at a higher level in terms of change, and that's, I guess it's the kaitiaki role and the protection over the wider whenua or the rohe here in Te Tauihu, so that there's a whole lot of things around, policy decision making, but just supporting our iwi around how we provide that role for the community. Won't get into too much detail with that one.
No, great. Yeah, Amy.
The one thing, well, I do heaps, lots, but one of the things, and I think it was touched about the consumer muscle that we all have, and is the organic bananas, the fair trade bananas, have a plastic strip around them. So I've been collecting them and posting them back to All Good and saying, these bananas are great, but the plastic is no good. And so, the people that make the hose fittings or the garden tools, they've got this ridiculous freaking plastic thing around them. And it was mentioned, that stewardship of products, and that if everyone pressures their companies, and I think things are moving, but it's not fast enough, come on. So if everyone takes that time and a stamp and post it back to them, and I'm believing that, each little one, I'm not going to buy your product anymore because you're using this, letters, emails, things like that on Facebook, all those things. So that's little things like that.
So I'm along the similar sort of lines, but I take a lot of pleasure in everywhere I go, pretty much just asking for what I want. So, do you have a vegan option? I make a pain, and I make myself a pain. Do you compost your food waste? Every single cafe, every single place I ever go to, just ask them. There's a huge power that we all have. Just ask the stuff. It will filter through everywhere, and it's free for us. That is something that we can do. And then praise and sing when stuff does happen. It's important to celebrate as well.
So, a big focus this year has been with a local gang of us who call ourselves a Good Food Group. There's a few people out the back there. We thought it would be a great idea to try and get some policy change happening at City Council level, and we came across this concept called the C40 Good Food Cities, which an international network of cities who want to act on sustainability. They came up with a declaration, and it focused on 4 key areas. So it's around reducing food waste, significantly more than our region's currently targeting. It's around supporting communities to shift towards healthy, sustainable diets, which is a big increase in plant-based foods, and making that affordable and accessible to all people. And it's also about shifting procurement for City Council foods and their funded events towards something that's known as like the planetary diet, which is sustainable for the planet, and working with communities and all represented parties who are interested in creating a good food future to come up with a 10-year strategy to make this happen by 2030. So we, being this group featuring multiple doctors and other community members, led a bit of a campaign where we tried to get lots of submissions to the City Council and the annual plan, and we did verbal submissions and things like that. And the DHB is supportive, and they also submitted, which was really exciting. We've been trying to encourage DHB to focus on sustainable foods for a while now. And they'll be launching their Meat Free Monday in the staff cafeteria this coming week, which is really exciting, and they're banning processed meats in their staff cafe all of the week. So that's a big win. And if anyone very much a team effort, and if anyone would like to hear more about it or support us on that, then come and find us afterwards. Anne and Graham are at the back, and they're going to have a little stall in the corner. And another thing that I like to do is to help promote local people who are doing good things in the space. So if you want to eat more plants, plant-based foods, then we've got a vegetarian butcher, Maria, who I think is here, and she's at the market every Saturday, and she'll make it very easy for you to switch over to some plant-based products and put them into your normal recipes. And there's also a support group which Anne and Graham at the back run. Graham's a doctor, and that's just set up last month, so it's $5 each time. Once a month you can learn all about how to eat more plant foods and do it in a healthy way. Yeah.
And can I just say what a privilege it is to be on sort of the receiving end of submissions from such fantastically engaged and intelligent people who everyone here you can see cares very deeply about our community here in Whakatū. And so before I open us up for a few questions from the audience, I do have one last one, which is maybe going reverse back down the line, which is we've sort of heard a bit about the individual choices you're making, but as we've discussed a bit, there is sort of that individual, and then there's that community level that think global but act local. And so in those sort of pipe dreams, those wondrous things of the next steps that Nelson as a community could take, what would excite you the most? I think I've got a decent guess on what maybe a couple of you might say, but I'd love to hear.
What the community could do.
I'll include council in that.
Okay. All right. The council is going to make the Good Food Cities Declaration. And we also submitted to Tasman, so Nelson and Tasman Council, and also the DHB submitted to Marlborough, so I would love to see it all across Te Tauihu. And I'd love to see the Climate Forum just exponentially growing in numbers, and I think the one thing I didn't expect out of it was that real connection part that I'm getting out of it, and it's like we started it and then we went into lockdown, but it's still become quite a place where I find hope, and I've found it every time I go to the face-to-face meetings, I come out of it feeling really inspired, and it's been really nice to connect with people. So yeah, I think if the community could come together more around, whether it's the Climate Forum, whatever group it is that sustains you, becoming more connected, I think that would be really exciting to see.
Ben?
Citywide food waste collection is inevitable, so don't worry about that. It's just a matter of time. In the short term, I'd say just show up. As individuals, show up to causes that touch you. That's what I'm doing, and that's where I find the most hope and the most positivity and the most. That's what sustains me, is showing up to what touches me. So I just encourage everyone to do that, and to find it and go and keep trying.
Just back on the bananas, I just want to let you know that I'm also growing a banana tree at home, so I put it out there to anyone who lives in a frost-free or has a little frost-free pocket that you plant a banana. So we don't actually have to import them in the first place. But what I'd like to see, I think I really would like to say we're really lucky in Nelson already to have an amazing food growing region and some really talented, hard-working horticulturalists. And we have markets, we have farmers markets all over the place, and supporting those. And I'd love to see more community-supported agriculture, not just out in the rural areas, but also in the city, urban gardening as well. And with my work with the seed library, that's the seed, that's the germination point, that everyone who has a little plot or has access to the community gardens, that you get to help build that seed stock so that you can share with the wider community. Community-supported agriculture, which is based on regenerative and ecological principles. Be connected with like-minded people, get inspired. And don't be scared. If you are scared, that's okay, but don't be alone with it.
It's quite a big question. I've got a trillion billion things flying around my head, but I guess the work that I do and the space that I work in is really around social and environmental justice, and it's about people flourishing, but our environment flourishing. So when I think about our Māori communities, there's actually quite a lot of really cool things going on at the moment, and it's around those aspirational kind of goals around how do we make change, and the Te Tauihu strategy is one of those things where we're connected as a community, and the iwi kind of led that space, and so we had those hard conversations, but also put forward our dreams. But another example is so in Motueka, at the marae there, so we're part of on the board of Te Awhana Marae there, and we've been thinking really hard about how do we create a healthy, vibrant marae, and it's going through a bit of a redevelopment at the moment, but it comes down to the environment, ensuring that our values, when we talk about kaitiakitanga, we can reflect those in the actions of what we're doing. So things like marakai, growing gardens, but there's education around that, so getting the rangatahi or the young ones to go out and do some eco-sourcing and planting, and learning about the rongoa or the herbal medicine or the customary practices and traditional methods and the ways in which we used to kind of operate with the whenua. So there's sort of killing a few different birds with multiple stones. You've got education, you've got social, you're looking at papakainga housing, I've actually been involved in a sustainable agriculture program, which is teaching, and my part was really around the space, and so I've had some pretty interesting conversations around agroecology and how that mixes with the Māori worldview, and me and a mate of mine, Willie, he's not here so it's okay, I can talk about him, but we've discussed, well, what would a healthy town look like, for example, or a place, and it would be looking at restoring our lowland forests, but people living amongst it and having sort of our food and everything amongst it as well. So we can actually really start to reshape the way in which we live and how we integrate with our place.
Now, before we close, we'll open it up to a few questions from the floor, if there are any. I'll serve as our sort of roving mic, so throw your hand up and I'll run to wherever you are. I'm going to go for the close one first.
Just want to say, first of all, it's great to hear from such an inspiring panel. There was some really awesome answers there, and it was really great to hear. As they mentioned in the documentary, it's really easy to get overwhelmed with it all and start to feel negative. I just wanted to hear from you, what do you think the audience could go away and do, sort of one thing, one easy thing that could really kickstart the environmental journey? What would you recommend?
Kia ora, thanks for your question. I actually used to be part of this group when I was at university in Wellington, and it was run by a guy called Sean Weaver. You guys might know him, who has ECOS, and he called it Ecodo, and it was like a place for environmentalists to come and basically it wasn't really a debrief session, but it was kind of like, how can you turn that frown upside down kind of scenario, because like you say, it is a very overwhelming thing when you have all these environmental problems. And so one exercise that he got us to do was to lie down on the floor. You try this at home if you like. And he'll just start, laughing, fits of laughter. I was thinking, what the hell is this guy up to? And then next minute we're all just laughing, and it was just really simple, but it was a way of combating, how we feel and coming together. So I'd recommend that.
Are we going through everyone?
If anyone else has a great negative insight like that, feel free to go. Otherwise, I'll eye up some more people.
I'll be brave. I'll be brave. The single most amazing thing that I ever did, which pulled me from an extremely deep depression, was going vegan. And 4 years, and I'll never go back. Every single day is positive. So.
Kia ora, I'm Lindsay. Thank you first, Rowan, for the great job you're doing tonight, and to the panel. I do have a question, but I would like to put in one plug, if I may, because there's been a lot of talk about food. Some people will know an organisation called Pure Advantage, which has had a fantastic regenerative agriculture series, which the last posting went yesterday. It's a sort of green business organisation, but this series has gone gangbusters. So Pure Advantage Regenerative Agriculture. So thank you. My question is that we've got a great audience, a great panel, and I suspect that we're pretty well all in a similar space, but there's 4.5 million people out there, and there's a chasm between where they are and where people have been in this film. And there's not a chasm of time. We're running out of time to make some of these transitions. I'd love to get the panel's views on how we take these important messages and a lot of the things that haven't been said, the transport and the buildings and things, and say, how do we permeate that quickly into the rest of the community so that we all get on this journey as quickly as we can? Thank you.
That's a tough question. Shouting it from the rooftops in every way possible, but in a really nice and positive way so that people are more open to hearing it. I mean, we can't really gloss over the truth, so, we need to be truthful and be honest about where we're at, the challenges we're facing. But I think trying to talk to as many people in as many different ways, and particularly those who have the ability to make decisions on where our country or our globe is going to be heading. And also, I think listening to the youth. The School Strike for Climate has, I think, in my opinion, had the most impact on what New Zealand is doing, and also listening to iwi, tangata whenua, and trying to elevate those voices, because I think they hold all of the answers, and we, as Pākehā, need to, hand over a lot of that power because it's very balanced at the moment, and the way that it's being managed at the moment, as we've seen, is going in the wrong direction.
Share that, Hannah. I think that chasm that you talk about, I think sometimes it looks bigger than it is, and I think it's up to us, and I'm no expert at this, having those conversations with the person that you're sitting next to on the bus, or the person, sitting in town, actually have a conversation and really listen to them, and listen to your own internal dialogue about what you're actually thinking when you're listening, hearing them, and you might actually, I think that chasm will actually draw, closer to joining, where we actually start seeing, and that is a little bit, airy-fairy, but I think if we can all do that and be brave to talk to that person that might look a little bit scary or different to us or different to the people that we're used to, that we actually get to really, bridge that gap. Also, the Climate Forum for me has been really good at sharing the task of doing submissions. I hate writing, I hate that writing bit. I'm actually writing a book at the moment, but submissions to council was really hard, but gathering with a group of people who were thinking similarly, and having that access, and using those processes that we have in our lives to make that bigger change and support the organisations that are, and the organisations that are doing it.
I think it's a social experiment. We've got so many multiple arrays of people with different disciplines, values, understandings. I mean, how do you bring everyone together to have a shared outcome? Because that's how you're going to get that change. And we're working in a political system that really needs a whole refurb, transformational change. And so having, brave leadership, but also values-based leadership, I think that's, would be a good start. So here you go, guys, a little challenge for you.
We've got time for maybe a couple more.
I have a kind of practical question. I was quite inspired about the poo in the movie, and I just want to know, can we just make a composting toilet in our backyard? Is that something we're allowed to do in Nelson? And if not, why not? And if we can't, then how do we make it possible?
You're not allowed. You're not allowed.
Just don't tell them.
Could we have some sort of collection thing and then compost it all nicely and put it on native plants and things? Could we set something out like that?
Alright, who wants me to collect that poo? Alright, I'll see you on Friday. You can compost your own poo at your own house like that guy was doing. There are issues with the pathogens that he talked about, so depending on what you do with your product is really important. So find somewhere responsible to put it afterwards.
Great question. We'll grab one more. Oh, perfect. Right next to me.
Tēnā koutou komari ahau. With expectation, encouragement for all of us to be self-sustaining and self-reliant, do you think with building roads to connect us to transport produce is still needed? Building more roads, that's still required at this time, when we're expected to be more self-sustaining and self-reliant?
Who wants to grab a transport question? I might get in trouble if I answer.
The whole transport thing is linked to this whole economic crisis that we're living in. So if we're going to start thinking more sustainably and being more resilient, it's actually reducing your carbon footprint and living locally and just having our own local economies here in this area. So I think roads are a bit OTT, over the top. we don't need to be doing that. We can start building our economies around us. Yeah.
Right, on that note, I will wrap us up. I'll just grab my piece of paper reminding me everything that I have to say. Firstly, thank you to all of you for coming along tonight. I'd like to say thanks to the people who made this happen, the Resiliency Subcommittee of the Climate Forum, Barb, Anika, Alison, Becky, JP on the tech, who's filming me. This is a little disturbing. And of course, the Nelson Tasman Climate Forum as a whole. I'd like to thank our fantastic panelists, Anika, Amy, Ben, Hannah. Can we give them a huge round of applause? And of course, to everyone who has and will be running stall out in the foyer, huge thank you to all of you. So please now, we've had these fantastic, inspiring discussions. Take that, run with it. We've got some stalls out in the foyer with great things currently going on in our community that you can get behind. I have some events to plug if you're thinking, wow, I'd love to get out into the community literally tomorrow. I have some things that you can do literally tomorrow. Yes, Sunday the 2nd, 10:30 sharp at Capel Market Reserve off Waimea Road at Russell Street. They're doing some edible tree planting, fruit, nuts, berries, and if you could bring some closed shoes, some garden tools, some gloves and weather protection, they'd love to see you there. Or you can also do tomorrow, there's a community garden celebration at the wonderfully new restored Paddy's Knob, the former car park turned into a wonderful park. That's at 1 p.m. Bring some food, a picnic along, and a plant for the planter box. So if you're in the mood for getting straight into it tomorrow, those are some options. Otherwise, now I invite you to head out to the foyer, check out some of the amazing things that are going on. And once again, on behalf of myself and the whole team, thank you so much for coming along and have a wonderful evening.